You have a female body out behind Burner Basin.
Oh, that's a 1092. That's a body.
Yeah.
Let's get out.
Yep.
I can see enough right now. Looks like a girl's hand. Let's back out.
Brittany Udge Lakey was just 16 years old when she disappeared. She had gone to watch her dad and his band practice at a nearby park while also planning to meet up with a new friend. 18-year-old Bryce Dickey had promised to bring Brittany home. However, when her father arrived home, he noticed she wasn't there and that she wasn't answering her phone. Alicia was sitting inside the sheriff's office when the call came in, and before anyone said the name, her motherly instinct kicked in as she broke down because a body had just been found outside town, and her 16-year-old daughter had been missing for 2 days. Just 48 hours earlier, Brittany Alaki had left home to meet a friend, got into a truck, and told her father she would be back soon, and nothing about that moment felt unusual until she never returned and her phone suddenly went silent. At first, the story was simple: a ride, a drop-off, and a vague description of a cowboy in a green truck. But as investigators started checking timelines and tracking movements, that version of events began to fall apart piece by piece. Because the last person who claimed to see her alive wasn't just a witness, and as the evidence came in, it became clear that he hadn't been telling the truth. And this would go on to become one of the most disturbing cases the town of Elko County had ever seen. But before we begin, if you find this video interesting, please give it a like at the end and tell me what you think about the case. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe for more. Thank you. This video is created solely for educational and documentary purposes. It does not endorse, glorify, or condone any of the criminal actions or individuals described in this case. Viewer discretion is advised. This is Alicia, and her daughter in question is Brittany Alaki, 16 years old, living in Elko County, Nevada. She had talked about joining the Navy, and she was considering paths in nursing or psychology, and those ideas weren't just passing thoughts. They were things she was actively working toward, things that gave her a sense of purpose beyond the small town she had grown up in. However, at home, things were different but still stable, because her parents, Jim and Alicia, were no longer together. And after realizing their relationship wasn't working, they chose to separate but remain close so they could continue raising their children together without disrupting their lives. So, Alicia moved out, but stayed nearby. And that arrangement kept both parents actively involved and allowed Brittany to grow up without feeling like her family had been broken apart. Brittany spent most of her time living with her father, Jim, and the two of them had built a strong bond over the years, one that her brother James would later describe as almost inseparable. And by early 2020, everything in Brittany's life felt normal. And then came March 8th.
Have you guys tried to call any of her friends or?
Everybody.
Nobody's heard from her?
No.
Okay.
Which is weird, because she's a social media freak. You know what I mean? She's always talking to people.
That Sunday started like every other Sunday, and Jim had band practice later that day, which was something Brittany had grown used to over time and even enjoyed in her own way. Earlier in the day, Brittany had been on her phone, moving between conversations and replying on Snapchat. And somewhere in the middle of all that, one conversation turned into a plan, and that plan involved someone she had known for years. Bryce Dickey wasn't a stranger. Bryce was often seen as someone who looked out for her, someone she referred to casually as a big brother.
So, Sunday, around 11, I started texting, got a few texts from Brittany, just asked if I wanted to hang out. I said sure, get ready and stuff. Told me she could meet me at Angel Park because she said her dad was doing band practice.
And this was the same story he had told the entire family, and they had no reason to doubt him because he had proven a good man over time.
Is there any other friends that were with Bryce, or it was just Bryce?
But it was just Bryce.
And she was with him, and then he dropped her off, and he had no idea who this guy was?
No, and he even said it seemed sketchy. And I'm like, well, why'd you leave her?
But Bryce still had more to say about that, especially how he drove around with Brittany for almost 4 hours, and the officer, sensing that something is fishy here, wasn't satisfied with his answer, and it was at this point that Bryce pulled up a weird consistency trick.
Between like 3 years ago and like a year and a half ago, she kind of made a name for herself because a lot of people around here didn't like Brittany.
Okay.
In that period, she got in a lot of fights.
Okay.
But, and then she talks to a lot of people.
And at the same time, Alicia revealed a detail that was quite critical to the case. It seemed Brittany had been seeing a new guy called JT, who was described as a cowboy and might be a suspect, someone investigators should seriously consider.
And all we know is that it was a green truck. We know nothing else about the individual.
No, the boy said it was an ugly green F-150 from the early 2000s.
And by the next day, the situation had moved beyond the family, and it had spread across the entire town, because once it became clear that Brittany hadn't come home and no one had heard from her, Alicia printed out hundreds of flyers, over 500 of them, each one carrying Brittany's name, her face. They were put up across Elko and Spring Creek, on poles, on windows, on doors, anywhere someone might stop and look. And at the same time, posts were going up online, spreading through social media, reaching people who hadn't even met Brittany but now knew her name. And it was at this highest point of searching and first panic that Alicia received a message from a number she didn't recognize. The sender claimed Brittany had been taken and demanding $7,000, and not through any traceable method but through gift cards, and they added something even more disturbing, saying Brittany had been given a substance to keep her sedated, and that she was getting sick, and that if the money didn't come quickly, she would not survive. And for a brief moment, that message changed everything, because it introduced hope in the middle of fear, the idea that Brittany might still be alive, that she could still be found, that this hadn't already gone too far. So Alicia didn't respond on her own. She took the messages straight to investigators. But as investigators dug deeper, the details began to fall apart, because the number didn't trace back to anyone in the area. It wasn't tied to a physical device they could locate, and instead, it came back as a spoofed number, something created to appear real while hiding its actual origin, and that alone raised serious concerns. Then there was the demand itself, because asking for gift cards instead of cash or a direct transfer wasn't random. It was a pattern, something investigators had seen before in scams, and when they combined that with the lack of any proof of life, no photo, no voice, no verifiable detail about Brittany's condition, the entire message started to look less like a real kidnapping and more like someone taking advantage of a desperate situation. And that suspicion was about to be confirmed soon, because just out in a remote area known as Burner Basin, a small group of local volunteers had been continuing the search. And as they moved through the terrain, something caught their attention, something that didn't belong there. So they called it in immediately. But it was the condition that they found her that was so alarming. And it was at this point that the ransom story totally collapsed. And back at the sheriff's office, Alicia was still waiting, still holding on to whatever hope she could, when Detective Stake received the update, and he knew what it likely meant, but he still had to approach it carefully, because until it was confirmed, he couldn't say it outright. And yet there was no easy way to say what needed to be said. So he walked into the room and he told her that a body had been found. And it was at this point Alicia broke down. Even if the investigator hasn't mentioned any name, she said she knew it was her daughter. Everything she had been holding together over the past 2 days collapsed in that moment. And the reality she had been trying to push away finally caught up with her.
It looks like a human head to me.
Yeah, it looks like a chest cavity in the dark podium or something. We walked over here on this side. I'm pretty sure that's their drag marks there.
Once the scene was secured and investigators began working through it step by step.
When Detective Stake arrived at the scene, he first noticed the blood stain on the roadway. A significant amount of blood saturated the soil in several areas. A condom wrapper was found on the edge of the roadway. Drag marks led from the bloodstains near the road to a female body located underneath a blue tarp. The body was face down and the tarp was loosely draped.
At the location, they identified multiple points of interest, and it wasn't just where the body was found, but also the surrounding area, where pools of blood were seen, and there were clear signs that she had been dragged across the area. And when was found, her pants were drawn to the knee, but that was not all. They found items that didn't belong there, including a used condom and its wrapper, both separated but within the same general area. And those items were immediately collected because they could carry biological evidence, something that could identify who had been there and what had happened. And then there were smaller details that mattered just as much, like personal belongings, items linked directly to Brittany, which helped confirm that this location was connected to her. At the same time, investigators extended their search outward, and about half a mile away, they located a damaged phone, consistent with Brittany's device, and the condition it was found in suggested it hadn't just been dropped, but intentionally discarded, and that added another layer to the timeline because it meant someone had tried to separate her from any way of being tracked or contacted. So while physical evidence was being processed, digital evidence became just as important because GPS data from both Brittany's phone and Bryce's movements began to place them in the same area, within close distance of where the body was eventually found. However, investigators began pulling surveillance footage from nearby locations, focusing on cameras that covered the roads leading in and out of Spring Creek High School, because their primary goal at that point was to find the green Ford F-150 Bryce had described, the truck he claimed Brittany got into. One of the most important sources came from a nearby Maverick convenience store, because its cameras captured a clear view of Boyd Kennedy Road, and that road was critical, since it connected directly to the school and also led toward the remote area where Brittany would later be found. So investigators started reviewing the footage carefully, frame by frame, expecting to spot that green truck, expecting to confirm Bryce's account, expecting to see Brittany transition from his vehicle into another. But instead, something else appeared. They found Bryce's truck, a dark-colored Chevy pickup consistent with his description, moving through the exact area he had described, and once they identified it, they began tracking its movement across the footage, following it as it approached the school. And what they expected to see, based on his statement, was a clear sequence. Bryce pulls in, Brittany gets out, the green truck arrives, and then he leaves. But that's not what the footage showed. Instead, the cameras captured his truck passing the entrance to the high school without turning in, and then continuing straight along Boyd Kennedy Road, moving further in the same direction where Brittany would later be found. And this wasn't a single clip or an unclear image, because investigators reviewed multiple timestamps and angles, and the sequence stayed consistent, showing that his vehicle never made the stop he described. Then they compared this with earlier footage from Angel Park, where Bryce said he picked Brittany up, and that introduced another issue, because the timestamps didn't align with his version of events, showing a difference of nearly 2 hours, which meant the timeline he gave wasn't just slightly off, it was significantly inaccurate. And when investigators placed that footage alongside his statements, the contradictions became clear, because what he said happened and what was recorded were two completely different stories. And suddenly, the version he had repeated from the beginning no longer matched reality at all. Notice that despite what the authorities has found, he was still trying to paint Brittany in a bad light so that investigators could consider the possibilities of someone coming after her because she's troublesome.
Besides that, and then, like I told everyone else, a lot of people had problems with Brittany, but nothing that we would see with this outcome.
And it was at this point that investigators asked if they've even been intimate.
Ever been into an intimate relationship? No. Nothing besides hugging and just no kissing or no friends with benefits or nothing like that.
Then came the lab results. The DNA recovered from the condom-matched Bryce, and Brittany's DNA was also present, and that directly contradicted what he had initially told investigators, because he had denied any form of intimate contact, and now that claim no longer held up. And beyond that, additional samples taken from Brittany, including swabs from her neck and underneath her fingernails, also matched Bryce's DNA, reinforcing the same conclusion from multiple angles, not just one piece of evidence, but several, all leading in the same direction. Then the autopsy then provided the final layer, because it established how Brittany died, confirming that her death resulted from a combination of strangulation and a neck injury. And it was not an accident. And so investigators, and to invite him for a second interrogation. So apparently Bryce had a girlfriend who would eventually become critical in solving the case, because while everyone, including Brittany's family, saw him as gentle, she had a very different story to tell, including multiple instances where he had strangled his girlfriend. At this point, he hadn't realized that investigators had already found the footage and uncovered his lies, and when they confronted him with it, you could see him start to fidget and stutter, and then come up with even more lies. He said he was about 18 years old, and even admitted that changing his story a little wasn't a big deal, and it was at that point that officers confronted him again, but this time with evidence from the crime scene. And that was when he cracked and revealed that they might have had something together, and yet claimed Brittany initiated it. But he still had one more lie up his sleeve, trying to distance himself from Brittany's final hours before her death. So on March 19th, 2020, Bryce Dickey was taken into custody. And for Brittany's family, especially Alicia and Jim, the news was difficult to process because Bryce wasn't a stranger, he wasn't someone distant or unknown, he was someone who had been around, someone they trusted, someone who had been close enough to their daughter to be considered safe, and that contrast made everything harder to accept. Then the case moved toward trial, and over time, more details came forward. One of the most significant came from Bryce's girlfriend at the time, who described multiple instances where he had choked her during intimate moments. And while those incidents had not been part of the initial investigation, they became relevant in court because they showed behavior that aligned with the medical findings in Brittany's case. At the same time, friends of Brittany provided their own accounts, explaining that Bryce had expressed interest in her and that she had rejected him. And that detail became important because it introduced a possible motive grounded in interactions people had witnessed firsthand. After reviewing the evidence and the testimonies, the jury reached a decision in under 4 hours. Bryce Dickey was found guilty of first-degree murder and sexual assault, and he was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 46 years. And that brings us to the end of this case. What are your thoughts on this case? Let us know in the comments. If this story shook you, there's more on the channel that dives into cases just as haunting. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, and share this video. It helps keep these stories from being forgotten. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.